I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. Ooh, I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Hi everyone, our next guest is Dr. Robin Stern. She is the Associate Director for the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. She's a licensed psychoanalyst, educator, and author with over 25 years of experience treating individuals, couples, and groups. We're going to get into the topic of gaslighting. This is a huge topic for our listeners especially, so we're recording this a little bit differently than we usually do because we're really going to get into what gaslighting is, what it means, and the definition of it and how it ties into emotional intelligence. So thank you for joining us on this interesting and special show. Hi, everyone. Kristen Walker here, and we're going to get right into this show. It's such an important topic. I'm so glad that you've joined us here. And Dr. Stern, thank you. I'm so excited about this. I did let everyone know that you're with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and I want to make sure we don't forget to talk about how emotional intelligence plays a role in what we're going to talk about today. But first, give us some definitions on what gaslighting actually is.
Sure. So gaslighting. So first, thank you for inviting me onto the show, and thank you for spending the time with your listeners focusing on this really important topic of what we call stealth bullying or psychological manipulation that is often under the radar. And so gaslighting, which usually takes place when there is a power dynamic, is a form of psychological manipulation that seeks to sow seeds of doubt in an individual or members of a group, hoping to make that individual question their own memory, their perception, and even their sanity. And that's a definition that I actually found on Wikipedia, and it is a compilation of many other definitions, and I think it's very clear. The reason I like to cite that particular definition is it's very clear. It's just about what the intention of the gaslighter is, whether it's conscious or unconscious, sowing seeds of doubt, and why they're doing that, hoping to make the people they're targeting question their reality, their memory, their perception, their sanity, and ultimately their character or self-esteem as well.
Let's tell everyone the movie that this comes from, just so that they, some of us know this, but for our listeners that don't, let's talk about the movie that was done by Ingrid Bergman called Gaslighting, and just what was the premise of that, just that gives us this great term that is very real.
Sure. So there was a movie, actually in the 30s, there was a play called Angel Street that was made into a movie then in 1944, starring Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer, called Gaslight. And in the movie, the husband engages in this very extreme lying, gaslighting, manipulation behavior with the intent to drive his wife crazy, and more importantly, with the intent to make her think that she's crazy, so that she would retreat from the world and disconnect from all of her contacts, so that he could ultimately steal her inheritance. I mean, that was his goal. The audience learns in the movie that he, in fact, had murdered the Ingrid Bergman's aunt, who was this wonderful singer and star, and who had been praised and given gifts by royalty all over the world. And so she had all these jewels in the attic of their house. And in the movie, Charles Boyer, as her husband, tells her that every night he's going to work in a space outside of the house, but really he's tramping through the attic. And the reason the movie is called Gaslight is one of the things that happens is in the house they live in, when the gaslight is turned on in one room, it dims in another room. So of course every night when he's tramping through the attic, he's turning on the gaslight there. So every night Ingrid Bergman, in the character Paula in the movie, notices that the gaslight is dimming, and when she asks for confirmation from the people working in the house for her husband and herself, or from her husband, they tell her that it's in her mind. But really, it's because he's upstairs in the attic looking for the jewels, and so he's manipulating the gaslight. And we have all either witnessed or been on one side or the other of gaslighting in our lives. I'm pretty sure of it. And if not us all, then the largest percentage of the listening audience.
Absolutely. And I think it's important. You and I did talk a little bit yesterday, and what I loved about what you had said then is it's not, gender specific. It can be a parent and a child. It can be two coworkers. It can be people in a marital relationship. It's not, it breaks all barriers. It's not barrier specific, and that there can be gaslighting that has dubious intent, malicious intent, which this is when a person knows that they're doing it, and they're probably they're doing it for a specific reason, like money, power, whatever. And then the added effect of some people do it because they just enjoy playing games with people, and then there are other people that are doing it because maybe this is how they were raised. They really aren't aware of it. It's part of their manipulative tools, and it's kind of a subconscious behavior of theirs in order to have control over their own environment. The damage is still there on the person, the gaslightee, but there are different flavors of this, I guess is my point.
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. It's certainly in my private practice through the years, the pairing I saw most frequently was a woman coming in saying that her boyfriend, her husband, her good friend who was male was gaslighting her. But that just happened to be the most frequent pairing I saw.
Right.
Of course, I also saw people who were girlfriends from the time they were little, and one became a gaslighter at some point, or they in fact switch roles, or mother and parents frequently gaslight their children out of their awareness, to your point. And in same-sex marriages or partnerships, one person may easily gaslight another, not necessarily being diabolical, but just because, as you said, that's the way they learn to do it. And I do want to say a little bit about the power piece that you mentioned. So whether or not you are malicious in your engaging in gaslighting doesn't eliminate the power piece. So you may be jockeying for personal power in gaslighting somebody else, even if it's just to make you more comfortable. So maybe that's the way you learned to get your bearings in a relationship moment where you are anxious, where you're being asked a question that you don't want to take responsibility for. And so it's not necessarily that it's power for power's sake, because you're a bad guy or a bad person, using the term loosely, obviously, but rather because in that moment you don't know any other way, and that's the most familiar way of gaining control. And so this is one of those places where emotional intelligence skills do come into play, because the not knowing any other way is a signal, or certainly a statement, that you haven't learned other ways of managing your anxiety. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about emotion skills, of recognizing and managing emotions, that's where one of the connecting points about emotional intelligence and stopping gaslighting is really seen.
Yeah, and I tell you, I have learned, and I didn't necessarily equate it to emotional intelligence until I spoke with you yesterday, and then my program director is a former counselor, so we can really go at it talking about all kinds of things like this. But we both came to the realization that our dealings with people who have antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, on up all the way to psychopathy, our dealings with those people and learning what they were doing and how much they devastated us, and, what we had to learn in order to survive and get out of those relationships and then thrive, and then also notice more quickly and retreat more quickly from new people that came in with these kinds of behaviors. We learned through the gaslighting, through the trauma, through the what have you, in order to have a toolkit of our own, to where when someone like that comes into our life, it takes way less time to go, I'm out. And that's where I think in this particular form, that emotional intelligence piece comes in, because you are aware, you see, they are trying to gaslight me. Whereas before, you're a lamb walking up to the slaughter. You have no idea what this person is doing. You just believe everything that comes out of their mouth.
Yes. And there are so many nuances to that. So, before you're aware, let's say, of the gaslighting, or the fact that you are succumbing to someone's reality, when really, rather than holding on to your own, you might be caught up in trying even to be emotionally intelligent by trying to read what the other person wants of you. Yes. So if you're socialized, and I know this is a very gender biased statement, but most women are socialized to please. Yes. Where certainly, and I guess I'm outing my age here, but certainly when I was growing up, and less so now, but there was a much more of a gender bias. Be a good girl, be nice, make sure everybody's happy. And so if the person who is gaslighting you is not happy, you're not happy. Right? And so in order to please somebody else, you may have to give yourself up, which many people do, unfortunately, in difficult relationships. And so you begin to learn that behavior, and alarm bells don't go off, because, in fact, that's what you're supposed to do.
Oh,
right?
That's such a good point. Yes. Absolutely. Here's an interesting, a case study. I had one who was constantly lying to everyone around him, and I was his consultant. And so he sort of, I guess, people like this always love to share their deviousness, because they, of course, think it's makes them superior. So he would tell me all the devious things that he was doing to other people, and I would sit there in horror, like, what? This is horrible. And then he, of course, started doing these things to me, because no one escapes. And what was interesting was to have him outright lie, but he had forgotten that I had installed a database at where we were working, and it recorded all of his emails. And even though I had warned him, be careful, because it is going to record your emails, and if you don't want your staff to see it. And so I caught him outright, in these lies, because I could look in the database and see, here it is right in front of my face. And it was fascinating I'm glad that happened, because not many people get that opportunity. You just have to know that person is lying and be somehow get out of that dangerous relationship and just feel in your gut, this was wrong. I don't have proof other than, what's in my own mind, which I've been told to question. But I know that this is wrong. And there I had the proof right in front of my face.
So I love that story, and that can be very helpful. And for some people, it will stop you right in your tracks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's fascinating about what you're saying is even knowing in your gut, even knowing in your head that person can't possibly be telling the truth.
Right.
Even having proof sometimes, like there is an email that comes at a time where the person said they weren't home.
Mm-hmm.
Or you, in one case, where actually the woman was gaslighting the man in this relationship, they had a plan. She canceled it because she said she wasn't feeling well. He wasn't really trusting her because she had been canceling a lot of dates. And she said, I'm going to be home tonight. I'm just really not feeling well. And so he called her a few times and she wasn't answering, and he gave her the benefit of the doubt. Well, she must be sleeping. And then he sent chicken soup to her house, and she wasn't home. She didn't answer the door, and the doorman said she wasn't home. And he said, I'm confused. Nice guy, right? I'm confused. I feeling so bad for you. I sent you chicken soup and you weren't home. And she said, I can't believe how suspicious you are.
Right.
Of course, what is the matter with you? I was home in bed. Why are you so suspicious? And he knew from hearing from the doorman, from the fact that she didn't answer the phone, from the fact that she didn't answer the door, he knew that she wasn't telling the truth. And they continued on like that with several other incidents like that, where he actually knew it doesn't make any sense. What she's saying can't be true because of these reasons. And yet, he didn't want to destroy the fantasy. Yes. That they were soulmates. They were meant to be together. They were. It was this incredibly romantic relationship because, in fact, when they were together in the moment, it was. Mm. And so, it's very hard to shake someone's direct experience. Wait a minute, but last night he told me he loved me, or she told me she loved me. Wait a minute, but last night it was so fabulous between us. I can't believe that somebody who would love me would tell me something that isn't the truth. So you're holding on to the fantasy. Right. Yes. And even though the person's not telling you the truth. And I think in people I've worked with through the years, there hasn't been one instance where someone has said to me, this is a total surprise when they discover they're being gaslighted. Everyone, on the other hand, said, I just knew there was something wrong. I just didn't know what it was. I had a feeling he was lying. I just couldn't face it.
Yeah, and
the red flags are there. The other thing before you, I know
no, keep going.
I just want to share this. The other place that emotional intelligence or really knowing where you start and where someone else and stop, and where someone else starts and stops, is in this emotional intelligence skill called self-regulation. One of the strategies is reframing. And so what does that mean? So you're upset, you're on a movie line waiting for your friend to come and go to the movies with you, and your friend is really late. And you're thinking to yourself, I can't believe she's late again. What? She's really disrespectful. I can't stand waiting for her anymore. Reframing means telling a different story about something that's happening in order to shift not only the way you're thinking about it, but also your activation level, so that you can approach the person calmly. So you tell yourself, wait a minute, I actually don't know why she was late. It's not, and let me play the believing game. It's not that she was disrespectful. Maybe something is going on at home, right? So that's a really great strategy to use, to tell a different story. This is so-and-so's first day on his job. How could I be expecting that he or she is going to know everything? Rather than, he's really slow. You know what I mean?
Right.
At the same time, the slippery slope is that when you are good at that, you begin to excuse bad behavior. So, my boyfriend is just it's not that he's really abusive. His mother and father were just really mean to him. He only learned how to scream and yell.
Right.
I'm just gonna think of it as he was overly controlled and he was badly treated when he was a child. So you can begin to excuse bad behavior to the point where what you're feeling no longer matters. And so what I tell people is that if something doesn't feel right to you, it's much less important who's right and who's wrong. If you're feeling put down, if you're feeling not like yourself, if you're feeling like something is wrong, it is.
How do you learn? Because this is one of the things that I remember being taught. I was doing a lot of volunteer work in a women's shelter, and we were told if a patient asks you what time it is, you have to tell them, look at the clock. You can't tell them what time it is. And I understand that now because their abuser told them, defined their entire reality. And so that was an exercise in, no, you can look at a clock and you can, you have the power to know what time it is.
Yeah.
It's difficult from listeners and even from my own childhood and other people that I've interviewed, when your parents are extremely abusive and they're your parents. They create your entire reality. And it can take years to wind yourself out of that and realize, oh my gosh, this is why I did this. This is why this happened. And try to figure out, what is normal for you? What is reality for you? Because out of the womb, it was chaos.
Well, and even if it's not chaos, imagine that you grew up with parents where everything was black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But you saw things in a more complex and nuanced way.
Right.
And so when you would say to your parents, well, I don't know, is that true every single time? And you were put down for that, or there was no gray area. So you learn to keep your dissenting voice quiet.
Right.
And over time, you lost touch with that voice, right?
Right.
Or if you are in a position, and I call it overzealous empathy, where you are constantly thinking about what's going on the other side, to the extent that you're spending so much time in someone else's shoes that you forget about what's going on in your own shoes. You're spending so much time thinking he feels really bad about that. Oh my God, he's so stressed out, that you forget to pay attention to the fact that you just were put down, that somebody just made fun of you, that somebody just manipulated you, because you're not focusing on that. And over time, you lose contact with what it is that you're actually feeling and thinking, right? Real danger. Same thing with the reframing, the slippery slope of reframing. He didn't mean it. He's having a hard time right now. He's only 3 hours late because he doesn't have a good sense of time. Nobody ever helped him with that growing up. And so you're constantly thinking about what's going on for the other person, again, to the extreme where you lose contact with what's going on for yourself.
Do you think it's important in those situations to have your lines in the sand? If he or she does this, or this, that's it. I'm done. I don't care what soulmate, whatever, how long the friendship is, whatever. Those are my lines in the sand. And if those things happen, any one of those things happen, there's no talking out of it. There's no being understanding. It just means I'm out.
I think that is useful. I haven't seen it actually be that effective. Because by the time you're thinking about, if he hits me, for example, or if he cheats on me, that's it. You are already down the road a piece where you are like negotiating with yourself almost. How much can I really take? And I do think that there are times where you hit that limit and you didn't even know you had it. Like all of a sudden, a patient of mine told me once that all of a sudden she found out in a moment that her husband had sold their house without telling her, and was angry at her because she wasn't happy that they had the money in the bank. Meanwhile, she didn't want to sell the house, and he was trying to tell her there was something wrong with her, that she wasn't thanking him and grateful to him that he had just put thousands of dollars in her bank account. And the fact that event was so extreme woke her up. Another patient was telling me that she was engaging in this behavior with a boss of hers that she knew was wrong, and the boss was gaslighting her and telling her, this is the way to the top, honey, and I'm not going to mistreat you. I would never do that, but I know how to help you to become more of yourself, and you become more of yourself by being that self with me. Right? And so she was engaging in behavior that she wasn't proud of. And then even though she kept saying, I don't feel good about this, I don't think this is right, he kept telling her that it was just because she was uptight. Many people have meetings on the couch. Many people have these kinds of things going on. And what was wrong with her?
Thank you, Harvey Weinstein. Good God, yeah.
But one day, she got an email from another friend telling her that this same guy, her boss, was engaging in the same behavior with somebody down the hall. And that woke her up. So sometimes you don't even know that you have that limit. And sometimes you will say to yourself, if he touches me, I'm out of here. And sometimes it takes somebody from the outside, like in the movie Gaslight, to say, you know what? This is not okay. He's abusing you. And in the movie, the character played by Joseph Cotton, who in the movie was a neighbor of theirs, thinking that there was some bad stuff going on in the house, and so he was coming to check it out and make sure she was okay. There's a scene that I love that I don't obviously have it memorized, but he says to her, who's walking in the attic. And you can see her like this kind of huddled over person saying, who's in the attic? And he says, who's walking in the attic. And then you see that she's kind of coming alive with the realization that, in fact, she did know all along that it was her husband who was walking in the attic, who was manipulating the gaslight, who was trying to drive her crazy.
How do you, how has your work been colored by people who grew up with abuse, and so their threshold of what's quote unquote normal is way far beyond someone who didn't grow up that way? How does that play into this kind of work that you do?
That's such a great question. It has a lot to do with why somebody might put up with bad behavior or manipulative behavior from the very beginning, where somebody else might say, no, are you crazy? That's not me. If you've grown up in a house where somebody tells you what you're thinking, like, you're not tired, you're hungry. Come on, you don't hate your brother. And worse, those are minor examples that many parents do.
Right.
Just the way we talk to our kids. Like, come on, we're not buying anything in the grocery store. You're not really hungry. Oh, but excuse me, Mom, maybe I actually am hungry, When you grow up in a way where somebody's telling you what you feel, especially extremely where it's kind of where what you feel is not okay, and in fact can be beaten out of you if you express it. And so you learn that there are certain feelings you can have, certain feelings you can't have. It becomes harder to identify when things. So you're right. The threshold for things not feeling right is very different. But it's the same process, though, of healing, in that it's still about, well, what do you feel? does this feel okay? And if you don't know what you feel, that may not learn to identify your feelings. But you usually will know, does this feel okay? Do I want more of it? Does this not feel okay? Do I want less of it? Sometimes when I'm working with people who have been badly abused, it's that binary. The only decision you have to make today is what I'm doing right now feel okay? Does that person's conversation with me feel okay? Does it not? And go from there so that you begin to acquaint yourself with what you feel. And another wonderful technique for that is actually writing down the conversation so that you can begin to see where it stopped being a conversation and either started being a power struggle or started being a manipulation and a put down of you. Like, I'm not late. You just have a problem with time, or, I'm not angry. I mean, that you're just provocative. If you didn't do that, I wouldn't be hitting you.
Yeah, it took me a long time to figure out. This is why I love this field. This is why I created this podcast, because I can't express my thanks to the counselors, the people that choose to do what you do, for helping me, because I just those were the only people telling me real reality. It wasn't my family, and it wasn't, I actually, up until a year ago, I thought, well, if a man sexually harasses me, I must be in love with him. I actually, even though I felt horrible, I didn't like it, but I still had that in the back of my head. And thankfully, I was married for a very long time, so I didn't deal with a lot of that behavior because I had a husband, so it didn't happen. But when I stopped being married and then men are coming into my life and whatever, I would just immediately be like, oh gosh, I'm so in love with this person, and they were actually sexually harassing me. And it took me a while to figure out, wait a minute, this is so not true. And I learned that from my father, hands down.
Sure. And, I'm glad you brought that up, because it just reminds me of a point that I just would like people to hear, that when with the Me Too movement, I think, I feel pretty strongly that it really has been a coming to consciousness of women, and a no more gaslighting me, no more. It's much less about let's point the fingers at our fingers at these horrible men, and much more like, I can see the light. I have clear sight. No more gaslight, clear sight. And it's very powerful, because when you realize what's going on, it all makes sense. I would say the majority of emails that I get about my book is, oh my God, you just told me what I'm going through. How did you know? Like, I had no idea that it was even a thing, because what we are used to needing proof. If somebody hits you and you have a black eye, or somebody screams and curses at you, you can point to that person and say, he cursed. But when you are feeling like, I just don't know what I think, or maybe there's something wrong with me, or maybe I am too sensitive, one of my favorite phrases, maybe I am too sensitive, then it's always your own fault. And people who begin to understand the gaslighting dynamic understand that maybe they are very sensitive, but that still doesn't change the fact that the guy beat them up,
right?
Or that the guy yelled at them, or that the guy was, or that their friend was 2 hours late and disrespectful. Maybe they are sensitive.
And it's so okay, because there's so much shame that is heaped upon women and men, because the Me Too movement is about, men as well, who've been sexually harassed and abused, their power dynamic. And what's so great, you're right, I love seeing it from that viewpoint. It's an awakening, because there's many times where, I had a show. Of course, we did several shows about this, but during the show, I realized, oh my gosh, I actually was I was actually, I wasn't raped, but I was in a situation where someone was touching me and I had said no and tried to push him away and he did anyway. And I didn't realize, I still had this thing of, well, that's what boys do and blah, 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 until we had this conversation 40 years later that, that was an event that happened that has colored, and the fact that my father gaslit me saying, this is what women are supposed to look like, which was Playboy and Penthouse. This is how women are supposed to behave. This is how, he was, it's okay for fathers to have sex with their daughters. I was constantly having this planted in my head that it's okay, even though I knew in my gut it was wrong. So of course that would put me in the perfect position. And I did confront him about this years later and said, do you have any idea the evil that you brought upon your own daughter, the choices that I have made in men because of the seeds you planted in me as a vulnerable child? And I got my apology from him, which, was greatly appreciated. But the point of this is not to blab about me. The point of this is I want listeners to understand you don't have to feel ashamed because these things have happened to you. You don't have to feel ashamed that someone is sexually harassing you and you quote unquote let it happen or pretended like you enjoyed it or thought even that you did enjoy it. It's how we've been conditioned.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for sharing your own experiences, making yourself vulnerable in that way. I think it allows people to feel like they can do the same, and also so appreciated that you take the stigma off when you share your own story. It's okay.
My listeners know way more about me than they ever wanted to know, but that's that's part of the thing. To share, because it lets, every time you do, that shame starts to just sort of right out of your body and go back where it belongs, which is with the abuser, not with you.
Yeah, and shame is a reason that, among others, that people don't get out of these relationships. Yes. Because if I am a strong woman who knows her own mind, successful in business, and I'm allowing myself to be controlled by somebody else, whatever it's called, that I don't feel great about the relationship, I may be ashamed.
I'm somehow complicit.
Right.
And what we're realizing with Me Too is, no, you're not. You are not complicit. You are not. But it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I want people to walk away with is you're not complicit in the bad behavior, but you can free yourself by understanding that the only way the bad behavior can continue to take place is if you stay there. Yes.
So once you recognize it, you then can be empowering the dynamic by not stopping the dynamic.
Right.
Which is why it is empowering to be able to say, this thing that has been hurting me for years, that I had no idea what it even was or why I'm feeling like such crap about myself, it has a name, and there's a way to get out. Right. There's a way to either stop it or I can get out. Very freeing.
When you've worked with people, have you also worked, I'm sure you have, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, have you worked with gaslighters who came in and admitted, this is what a part of what I do that's abusive, help me, I don't know how to stop this, or,
I have worked with people who began to understand that they were gaslighting as a result of reading my book, or as a result of somebody telling them, and were surprised to learn about it. I have not worked with someone who was intentionally gaslighting and came to me to try to get help stopping it. I have worked with people who didn't realize. And then we're trying to stop it. And of course, I mean, when I say didn't realize, they knew very well that they were manipulating the reality. They just didn't realize that the impact it was having on the other person long term, or they knew very well they didn't want to take responsibility. I mean, the classic is, well, where were you last night, honey? What is the matter with you? You know, why do I need to have an inquisition when I get home from work? Like, there's something really wrong with you, that you don't trust me. But I noticed that this thing was out of place, or your secretary didn't know where you were, or I couldn't find that you're on your calendar, or you said you'd be available. What is the matter with you? Right? And so in that situation, the person who doesn't want to take responsibility, coming into therapy saying, I can't believe my wife is leaving me, she caught me having an affair, or she caught me in a series of lies, and I didn't want this to be the result. Actually unpacking those interactions can often say, well, I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't admit where I was. I didn't know what else to do. And so it's not, it's, there are many reasons why somebody would see what they're doing, but have good excuses for it, or not know what to do that's different.
Right. And that can be how they were raised, if they were in an abusive situation themselves, and you reach for the power. There are many things I always wondered. Why did I always want to be a boy when I was a little girl? Boys had the power in my family.
They had the power.
Not good. It wasn't empowering power like how I feel about myself now, but it was what I saw as power, and their behavior was atrocious. And, I certainly didn't want to go down that road, but yeah, it takes a long time for people to figure out, especially if it started on you so early. But I do have friends that had wonderful childhoods, and they got in a relationship with someone, oh la la, they fall in love, this person's my soulmate, and then they're psychologically destroyed by this person. And then it starts with the gaslighting.
Yeah. And when somebody you trust, actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because so you have a great childhood, and you trust that the people who love you are going to take care of you and be respectful and see the world in the same way to some extent, right? So then you marry somebody, or you get involved with somebody who then loves you, and you expect the same of that person. So when that person starts to manipulate you or tell you what your reality should be, you're not thinking manipulation, you're thinking, he loves me. Why would somebody who loves me tell me something that isn't true?
Right.
Doesn't feel right, but okay. And then the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time, it begins to feel like you're listening to the same channel.
Yes.
Over and over and over again. And that channel is telling you something that is different than the way you saw the world. And after a while, you think, well, if he's seeing it and he's so certain. I mean, that's one thing I noticed also, that gaslighters, in those moments, they are very certain.
Oh, my gosh,
and
yeah.
You may not be as certain. And so the minute you have a thread of doubt, or the minute you say, you know what, you're right, I am a little vulnerable, I am a little sensitive, then that's their door in. Okay,
last question for you, and next, I know we need to wrap up, but in the sense of, let's say, politics, and we won't pick a politician, but people, look for leadership, and oftentimes people in leadership positions are narcissists that use gaslighting and use it so well, and they're so charming, and they can be quite successful in at least one area of their life. Their personal life could be a disaster, but boy, do they make a lot of money. Whatever it is that society can kind of look at and go shiny, sparkly, and get bedazzled, but they they absolutely believe the person that's gaslighting because of the surety in which they make their gaslighting statements.
And because of their want to believe them. So if somebody tells you, hey, you know, I really like that red shirt you're wearing today, and you're wearing a blue shirt, you're not going to say, gee, am I wearing a red shirt? You're going to look at your shirt and you're going to say it's a blue shirt. But if somebody is telling you something that is not quite as observable, so it has to do with the way you're behaving or the way you're thinking, and you're taught to respect nuance, to see things in granular ways, not to be so black and white, and that person is somebody you look up to, you may start to think, well, gee, you know, am I looking at this in the right way?
Maybe it is blue under a certain
Maybe
way.
it is blue. Maybe it is blue. And, you know, just to pick a politician, one of the reasons that I reissued, or Random House and I decided to reissue the book, is that gaslighting was becoming very popular in our culture. And there was an incident where during the election cycle, the comedian John Oliver was saying a piece on his show about how he himself allowed himself to be gaslighted by Donald Trump, because he had not invited Donald Trump to be on his show, and yet Donald Trump said, "You have invited me to be on your show." In fact, he insisted on it so many times that John Oliver found himself, to your point, because he was so certain, going back to his producer and saying, "Did we invite him on the show?" Even though he knew he didn't do it.
Right.
But because of the repetition and the certainty and the intensity of the certainty, he said, well, gee, maybe I need to check again.
That's how these people get in. And I have learned that, do I trust no one? No, I don't. I do trust people. I have my inner circle that I do trust, but I trust myself, and this is hard won trust. I had to get to the place where I trust me.
Right.
Above any other relationship, I trust me.
That's right. And good for you, and congratulations. And you're absolutely right. It is really hard work. Really hard work. And at the end of the day, to keep your life gaslight free, you have to be scrupulous about checking in with yourself. Yes. Knowing, what are you feeling? What am I thinking about this? And even if you need to take a step back or leave the situation momentarily or for a while to get your bearings, it's critical for your integrity. Even if that's your family, even if it's, listen, if you have to step away from, members of your own family because this kind of dynamic is going on and you need that break in order to get yourself centered, please try not to tell yourself that you're a horrible person for doing that. Doesn't mean that it has to be forever, but man, you need that space to get right again. And I think that the taking your power back in a gaslighting relationship does involve having the willingness to leave or have a big separation, even if you never have to. Because if you're not willing to say, I can't go there anymore, you can't do that to me anymore, I see it on paper, here's where you turn the conversation. My friend who's known me for 30 years said that I've never been like this. I'm depressed. I can't find my joy. I don't even know where my reality is. You're not willing to say, I want myself back. And I'm going to fight to keep my integrity by every ounce of self-awareness I have, then it's not going to work for you. Yeah. As hard as that is. Right. But hey, you are your biggest advocate. Be that advocate for yourself. be that advocate, and at the end of the day, you'll have yourself.
Yes.
And that's always the best beginning.
Well, yes, Dr. Robin Stern, thank you so much for doing this show. I can't express to you how important this will be to our listeners. And please tell our listeners the name of your book so they know where the heck to go buy it and read it.
So thank you very much for having me on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really appreciated that you were as involved in reaching your listenership as I was in talking to you. So that was great for me. The book is called The Gaslight Effect: How to Spot and Survive the Hidden Manipulation Others Use to Control Your Life. You can find the book on robinstern.com, my website, and you can find me at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to our listeners for another edition of Mental Health News Radio.
Good intentions, I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps. Or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it.
Good boy.